Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Firstly, as per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, very, very much appreciated. Had a lovely email from Victoria at Dram. She enjoyed the show, was going to share it on social media, and didn't make any suggestions about how to improve my whiskey tasting ability, which is good. You may remember that from the last episode, or probably an older episode of the show I did on Dram. And this is the thing. Obviously, there were some bottlings that they had released which I thought were absolutely stunning, and some that I was not quite so keen on. And it's, she obviously took that sort of critique on the chin, so to speak. Not that I said any of them were particularly bad, but I obviously pointed out what I thought were the pros and cons of all of them, I suppose. And this is the thing, you send me samples. If I do a review of them, you'll get an honest review. Admittedly, it's one person's review, and as a number of independent bottlers and distillers have said, well, somebody's going to like that whiskey, and of course they're probably right. Somebody probably will. I have my own preferences for whiskey, and other people obviously have a similar. But at the end of the day, I try and judge everything on the quality of what's put in front of me, and I think that's what everybody appreciates. And while we're talking about that, I had a visit earlier this week from the rep from Tomatin, along with the UK sales director. His name completely eludes me, but we were having a good conversation about various bits and pieces, and the topic of the revamped antiquary came up. And as you know, I did an episode of the show not so long ago on them, and I pointed out to the sales director that they made what I think was an error with regards to the ABV of them, all bottled far too low in my personal opinion. Certainly the 30-year-old should have been bottled at 46% non-chill filtration and all that kind of stuff. And because I said, aside from the obvious increase in the intensity and flavour and all that kind of stuff that 46% non-chill filtering will give you, that customers that buy that kind of level of whiskey, a premium whiskey, expect 46% non-chill filtration. It all goes hand in hand with being a premium product, in my personal opinion. And you know what the UK sales director from Tomatin said to me? You're the only person that's actually said that to me. And I said, I was actually quite surprised, because I can't believe that I am the only person that feels that way about ABVs, non-chill filtration, that kind of thing. I'm probably the only person that would say it to his face, and well, you ask for my opinion, I give you my opinion. If you like it or not, that's secondary, I suppose. Whether you do anything about it is tertiary. You ask for my opinion, I give you my opinion, and that's my honest opinion. Yeah, so I just thought that was an interesting little tidbit that I would share with you. Anyway, that has no bearing really on today's episode of the show, because everything is hunky-dory with regards to sort of ABV and non-chill filtration and all that kind of stuff. And as you can see, we are looking at two sets of independent bottlings. The first set is from Woodrow's of Edinburgh, who I did an episode of the show on not so long ago, probably last year I think it was. This is a bottling range bottled by Islay Alba, and I'm looking at their Q1 selection that they kindly sent me. I know we're now into Q2, and this is the problem when I've got three samples. It's kind of like, what do I do with them? I have to wait for another independent bottling company that sends me three samples, and lo, another one duly did. Now this is a new independent bottling company, well, sort of new. It's called the Curious Whiskies, and they are bottled by a company called Geyer and Gimble. Now Geyer and Gimble, for those of you that may or may not know, is a gin distiller that is based in my hometown of Norwich. That's right, boy. Don't get me going on that. Anyway, so as we all know, gin sales have well and truly fell off a cliff in the last couple of years. So gin distillers are either going bust or they're looking to do other things. Some obviously have moved into distilling whiskey, but of course obviously you need to sit on it for at least 3 years, and sometimes a little bit longer than that. So Geyer and Gimble have created the House of Geyer and Gimble, a bit highfalutin, I guess, but they've decided to partner up with a very well-known independent bottling company. I don't know whether they want me to tell you who it is or not, probably not, so I won't, but you know, I've got no problem with that. That's exactly what I did for Gauntleys. I basically, you know, approached Brave New Spirits because I knew they had a good inventory of casks and said, what have you got? Send me some samples, please. And I'm pretty certain that that's what Geyer and Gimble did. So they approached a certain independent bottling company, chose some casks, created their labels, all that kind of stuff. So one is expecting good things from those particular bottlings. So not a great deal else left to say. I'll just take a look at today's lineup.
Take me to the sea and let me wash.
Actually, it's quite interesting. Today's lineup kind of picked itself, and it's kind of, you know, we're going sort of Woodrow's Curious, and it's just the way it's fallen quite nicely, I think. So we're going to kick off with the Woodrow's of Edinburgh Warehouse Blend. This is batch number 2. Now, as far as I'm aware, this is a blend that they put together themselves rather than sort of buy in already pre-blended casks of whiskey. Batch 2 is 35% 4-year-old Glen Elgin, which is refill hoggy, 29% 9-year-old Glen Ord, refill hoggy, 21% Whitlaw, or Highland Park, 6 years old, refill hoggy, and 15% teaspooned Campbelltown blended malt, 6-year-old first fill bourbon barrel, bottled at 50%. So we'll see what batch number 2 is all about. Whiskey number 2 is a 15-year-old Jura. Yeah, well, I'll let that one sink in for a minute. My good old favourite distillery Jura. So it's an ex-bourbon cask finished in Oloroso. I don't know how much time that actually was finished in Oloroso for, because it's barely added any colour whatsoever. Distilled in 2009, bottled last year at 46%. Second Woodrow's bottling is a 15-year-old Glen Elgin. This is a first fill bourbon barrel, I believe, either finished or I think finished in Bordeaux red wine hoggy. This was cask number 806811, distilled in September of 2009, bottled in March of this year at 63.6% at 15 years of age. Wow, my God, that was a tight cask. That's all I can say. The next bottling from Curious Whiskies is a 15-year-old Craigellachie. This is an ex-bourbon barrel, or I believe barrel could be an ASB possibly, finished in ex-European sherry casks. It was distilled in 2009 and bottled last year. Then moving on to the final bottling from Woodrow's. This is a 28-year-old Arran. So this is a refill sherry hogshead. Again, not a huge amount of input from the cask on that one, so which will be interesting to see what that's like. Cask number 172, distilled in February of 1997, bottled in March of this year at 57.8%. And the final bottling of the afternoon is a bitter peat. So this is what Curious Whiskies have called Dirt Turf. Yeah, cool name. Like the labels, like the labels on the Curious Whiskies. I don't quite follow. I'm assuming that the pictures have some kind of correlation to the distilleries possibly, but I have no idea what a chicken, or is it a rooster, possibly has to Islay. But anyway, they look quite cool on the shelves, I have to say. So this is a blended Islay malt whiskey. It's bottled at 46%. Now, I don't fully know what the blend is, but I think we can probably have a good stab at guessing. And obviously bottled at 46%. So that's today's lineup. Let's kick off with a bit of a warehouse blend then, shall we? Right, okay, so let's see what batch number 2 of the warehouse blend gives us then, shall we? That's a nice nose actually. That's kind of quite fresh, citric, lemon, barley, robust, slightly oily apricot, apple. Certainly the Glen Elgin is coming through quite strongly now, more so than on the previous batch. Now batch number 1 I think was more angled towards the Glen Ord. I think it was 40% Glen Ord, 30% Whitlaw, 20% Campbelltown, and only 10% Glen Elgin, and it was a bit hard work, I have to say. Glen Ord is kind of an interesting kind of whiskey, very oily, doesn't give you an awful lot, to be frank, and it was a bit rough, I hate to say it, but this particular batch number 2, is absolutely gorgeous, lovely. There's a little bit of vanilla, a bit of wood spice, and I think it really helps that the Glen Elgin is a lot more upfront and a bigger component of this particular blend. Got a nice little bit of peat, a little bit of earthiness just creeping through from the Campbelltown, and this is just really nicely balanced. Let's see what that's like. Generous, fruity, oily, waxy, quite heavy, quite robust. Again, the Glen Elgin leading off here, and I can see why a lot of distilleries, a lot of blenders love Glen Elgin. It has that kind of almost kind of Blair Athol-y kind of character. I was about to say Craigellachie then, but no. What am I thinking of? Linkwood. You know, those kind of sort of heavier, sort of slightly more robust styles of malt that you can build around. And it's always freaked me out why the hell independents kind of smother bloody Glen Elgin in sherry, but then again I assume it's because it has that robustness, they try and do that. But anyway, coming back to this, it's got a lovely fruitiness, sort of nice weight, some oiliness, some maltiness. The Campbelltown just kind of trickles through slightly on the mid palate, a little bit of fish, a little bit of dry peat, a little bit of coffee bean. Yeah, I like that. It has a kind of a sort of a pseudo old-fashioned kind of character, but a modern character at the same time. That little bit of Campbelltown is adding to the old-fashioned kind of feel, but because the Glen Elgin is the biggest component, it comes across as wonderfully fruity, lovely intensity, and a really nice blend. So great one to start with, I think.
Outside and say no more. We still have places to
Right, okay, time for some Jura. Yes, one holds one's breath when one comes across an axis of evil bottling, but let's see what the nose gives us. Well. That's actually quite a pleasant nose for a Jura. I mean, hang on. You're going to have to sit back here. Those words do not generally tend to follow or get used in the same sentence. But you know, Jura back in the day, 20 odd years ago, was producing some lovely spirit, lovely summery style of whiskey, and then it all went a bit Pete Tong somewhere along the lines, and I think it was, as I've said on many occasions, all down to demand. The whiskey got sort of very popular, they pushed those poor old stills, they fiddled with the cut points, and they ended up with quite a rough spirit. And but this just goes to prove that once upon a time Jura was producing a really lovely spirit. It's quite floral, it's got some barley, it's got some lovely creaminess from the oak. There's a little bit of dried fruit just sitting in the background. I mean, this is again judicious use of a sherry finish, just to add a little bit of dried fruit. I mean, it's not really perceptible, to be honest with it. Again, it's got that lovely summery kind of feel, summer flowers, summer meadows, that kind of stuff. And this really is a kind of bygone bottling. I mean, they broke the mould with this bottling, this cask, and if there's some more of these casks knocking about, I suggest Curious Whiskies, you go buy them, because this is absolutely gorgeous. It really is. I mean, it's not perfect. There is a little bit of an edge there, I will give you that, but you know, on the whole, I am seriously impressed. Let's see what that's. A little bit more sherry on the palate, kicks off with the dried fruits. But again, not too much sherry. It does take a little edge off the fruitiness, but the fruit's still there. The barley, not quite as mature as I would expect at 15 years old. It still has that lovely freshness, more down to the citric element. Lovely vibrancy, really, really nice. And again, it just carries on in that kind of, sort of fruit, barley kind of mould. A little bit of salt right at the finish. I mean, that is a lovely Jura. I mean, it just blew me away. I could not believe that that was a Jura. But then, like I said, you have to think about it, that back in the day, it wasn't quite such a dog. But, there you go. Really good. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 15-year-old Glen Elgin. So, first fill bourbon, Bordeaux red wine hoggy finish. Yeah, what did I say about sort of Indies and their obsession with finishing Glen Elgin? I mean, and on the one hand it works, because Glen Elgin has that robustness, it stands up to the wine cask, but the wine cask is just too dominant. I mean, it's really winey, red currants, red berries, dusty tannins, earth, and it kind of brings out the oiliness and the robustness of the Glen Elgin, but none of the fruit. The fruit just is not there. There's a little bit of kind of baked dark fruits. I mean, it's a pleasant nose. I mean, nothing wrong with it whatsoever. It, again, like just so many finishes, it's just strayed, for me, too far into the finish. And there's just not enough light and shade going on. Let's see what pass on. Yes, that's 60%. Whoa, that gets you right in the back of the throat. Certainly no shrinking violet, but again, it's very, very cask orientated. It's very short. It's the flavour all sits in the roof of your mouth, which is quite bizarre actually. Again, lots of red berries, a bit of chocolate, coffee, dried tannins. It's got a juiciness there, which is obviously being contained by the alcohol. There's a little bit of menthol on the finish. Let's see if a little drop of water kind of opens that out. Yeah, it has kind of pushed back some of the wine cask, and I am getting a little bit more sort of fruit, a little bit more almost kind of baked fruit. It's quite interesting. That it's the same age as the Jura that came before it, but it smells a lot older, has a lot more maturity, the sort of level of maturity I would expect a 15-year-old to display. Yeah, slightly better balance now once you put a little drop of water with it. Let's just see what pass on. It's still pretty heavy on the wine cask, on the palate, although the wininess is less dry, it's less tannic. It's actually got this kind of quite lovely sweetness now, not honeyed sweetness, more syrup sweetness. But it's all about those juicy red fruits and that syrup, and there's a little bit of distillery character there just underneath if you look hard enough. But I still think my previous comments stand. I think it's just a little bit too heavy on the wine cask, not enough balance in my opinion.
Night talks with cheap white wine and cigarettes for dinner.
Right, okay, so let's move on to the Curious Whiskies 15-year-old Craigellachie. So ex-bourbon finished in ex-European sherry. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Oh. That is a vegetal and cabbagey nose. It's been a long time since I've come across anything sherry that's remotely come across ice. I remember Murray McDavid bottling I think it was a heavy first fill sherry Linkwood, and my God, it just stunk of cabbage. But that was 25 years ago, and I thought that was what sherry casks were all about, you know, in my naivety, shall we say. It's I hate to say it, but this is rough as hell. There's a little bit of I mean, you know, it's Craigellachie as well, you know, it's that sort of idiosyncratic Craigellachie, which can be quite fruity, but more often than not tends to be quite hard. And you've got that hardness and a dodgy sherry cask that you've finished it in, and no, that is certainly not appealing. I mean, I'm certain that there are some people that will kind of die for this stuff. This is the customers that love kind of dirty old Campbelltown stuff, isn't it? You know, you like your stinky sherry, well, you're going to love this one. But there's a little bit of white fruit. Okay, it settles down a little bit with time. You just give it an hour in the glass before you even go close to it, and you might actually avoid some of that sort of sulphur. Anyway, let's see what the pass on. Okay, so there's less of that cabbaginess. There's still some sulphur there. It's still a bit rough. There's a little bit of fruit there, but it's kind of fleeting. There's a classic Craigellachie edgy kind of white fruit, sort of traditionally kind of rawness. Now, I mean, I know there's an awful lot of people that just can't pick up sulphur at all, and you know, but unfortunately, I'm one of those poor sods that kind of picks it up far too easily. And there was a lot of sulphur there, in my opinion. Just a really bad sherry cask that was used to finish it in, and it's a real shame. But you know, these things happen, and yeah, that one goes down as a bit of a miss, I think. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 28-year-old Arran. 57.8%. That's still a good ABV for a spirit of that age. Let's see what the nose gives us then, shall we? Oh, that's a lovely nose. That is wonderfully mature. Subtly coastal. It has that dusty old American oak. It's fragrant. It's floral. Apple, apricot, a little bit of ginger, some cinnamon, vanilla. Oh, you know, sometimes, as I keep banging on about, you just have to leave a whiskey in its American oak cask and just let it get on with it, and you end up with something like this. It's just magical, absolutely stunning. Not going to be cheap, I hasten to add. I must admit I didn't work out what the retail price would be, but you know, it ain't going to be cheap. Oh, it's just beautifully mature. Light coastal character. I mean, it might not have spent a huge amount of time on Arran, given the fact that the coastal element isn't very strong. A little bit of kumquat, lime. Oh, just like coffee. No, not like coffee. Late harvested honey, yeah. Dark late harvested honey. I mean, oh, just one of those whiskies, you stick your nose in the glass and you keep getting new aromas. Let's see what it passes on. That's a lovely palate. A lot of old American oak, sawdust, old vanilla, a little bit grippy tannins. The alcohol is certainly sort of just emphasising those tannins ever so slightly. They do grip on the finish. Yeah, you don't notice any sherry on the nose. I mean, this is the weird thing. You know, it's a refill sherry, but it's displaying very little sherry on the nose. The palate, there is more of it. It kind of comes through right on the mid palate, so it kind of kicks off with the dustiness of the old oak. It's possible that it's an ex-American oak sherry cask, possibly. Some dried fruit, dried apricot, a little bit of sultana comes through on the middle. It's quite oily and coastal on the finish. Really nicely balanced. You could argue that the alcohol is shortening the finish a little bit. Personally, I don't really think it needs water. It's absolutely gorgeously balanced as it is, but we will put a little drop of water. little bit more vanilla, a little bit more summer fruits. I mean, this is the thing with sherry casks. All wood, you know, irrespective of whether it's European, American or what have you, contains vanillin or vanillins, and sometimes they are quite noticeable. And I just guess that this is obviously spent, it was a refill sherry cask to start off with, so one doesn't know how refilled, but probably not very much, and the sherry is just kind of over the years just dissipated, and it's almost like an American oak cask, a slightly sweet American oak cask. Anyway, let's see what it tastes like now. Again, the sherry influence is completely gone. It's lessened. Hasn't really lengthened it. I think this whiskey has obviously been bottled more or less at the right time. Maybe a couple of years earlier might have helped the finish. It's got a bit of a shortness to it, which I'm quite happy to forgive. It's not quite so complex or interesting once you put some water with it. Like I said, I don't think it really needed any water at all. It's not like the alcohol was intrusive. It was just really, really lovely once it was neat and Right, okay, so on to the final whiskey of the afternoon, on to a bit of peat. This is the Curious Whiskies Dirt Turf, a bottle of 46%. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Camellia, just shouts Camellia at me, that modern sort of oily kind of rich Camellia. There's a little bit of pepper, a little bit of menthol, a little bit of medicinal herbs, barley, vanilla. I mean, there's maybe a little bit of unpeated Bunnahabhain in there. Maybe there's a little bit of peated Bunnahabhain, possibly. Maybe that's where that medicinal note is kind of coming from. Don't get any smoky more. I can't imagine there's any Kilchoman in there. So, but either way, it doesn't really matter what the hell's in there at the end of the day, does it? I mean, it's a lovely nose. It's got some nice sweetness to it. It's not boring, it's not one-dimensional. Yeah, that's a really nice blend. Whoever put the blend together has done a lovely job, and it retails for, what does it hit the shelf at? Just under 50 quid. What's not to like about it, you know? And as long as you're not kind of worried about names and distilleries and all that kind of stuff and single malt, which really you shouldn't be these days. And I keep banging on about sort of like that you really shouldn't get tied up in that kind of stuff. Just concentrate on what the fact is it a lovely whiskey? And this is a lovely whiskey, certainly from the nose. Anyway, let's see what the tastes like. That's really nice. It actually encapsulates both modern and old school Camellia. I get that lovely oily rich Camellia, but I get the garden peas, the garden freshness of old school Camellia. There's a little bit of medicinal notes. There's some dry peat, earthy peat, a little bit of licorice, white fruits. The oak kind of comes through quite nicely on the mid palate. It's got quite a creaminess. I imagine there's some first fill American oak casks used there. Lovely length to it. The sort of medicinal notes linger, but they're not overly medicinal. It's not too medicinal. It's not too sort of Lafroigy. Like I said, this is all centered around Camellia, and like I said, it has that lovely kind of like modern and old school Camellia feel to it. That's really, really impressive. That's a lovely blend. I'm not sure what's giving it the old school Camellia character. Kilchoman kind of comes to mind, but I'd be amazed if there was some Kilchoman in there. I mean, but it certainly has that kind of sort of fresher kind of Islay character happening there. It's possibly down to sort of like the age. I mean, it feels young-ish, but there's obviously some older spirit there right in at the core. When I say older spirit, probably around about 10 maybe. But overall, I mean, like I said, you forget about it. The fact that I've spent so long talking about this particular blend, it's got to be a testament to the fact that that is a really, really good blend. Yeah, not much more to say about it than that, really. Okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Firstly, a big thank you to both Eastland Alba and to House of Garden and Gimble for the samples for today's episode of the show. Hopefully you'll both sort of be happy with the review. It's kind of nice to begin and finish with a blended malt, and certainly I think the Woodrow's Warehouse Blend batch number 2 was certainly a lot more impressive than batch number 1. Lovely balance, nice blend of the different whiskies, and certainly, like I said, it had that kind of old-fashioned kind of feel, but also a modern feel at the same time, and the fact that the Glen Elgin was a lot more front and centre, American oak age Glen Elgin, I hasten to add, just made that work really, really nicely. What can I say about the Jura? A Jura that I said was lovely. I mean, you know, these days that's practically unheard of. So, like I said, you know, if Curious Whiskies have got access to any more of those casks, well, I would buy them. Like I said, broke the mold on that one. The Glen Elgin from Woodrow's, again, like I said, too many independents have a fetish for finishing Glen Elgin in all other types of casks, you know, whether they're sherry or ex-wine, and although it kind of deals with it because of the robust character of the spirit, it still gets lost, unfortunately, under the finishing cask, and this was a prime example. The Curious Whiskies Craigellachie, unfortunately undone by a dodgy sherry cask at the end of the day. Maybe whoever sort of like decided to select that one doesn't pick up sulphur. That's the only thing I can assume, but that was what kind of trashed that one. The Woodrow's Arran, oh, that was a lovely whiskey, and you know, we all know that Arran produces lovely whiskey at the end of the day. I mean, in saying that, there have been some rough old Arrans over the time, but that was certainly a gorgeous Arran, has to be said. And the Curious Whiskies Dirt Turf, a lovely peated malt. Obviously, if you don't like peated whiskies, you're never going to like that kind of thing, but I thought that was really impressive, and like I said, because it had lots of complexity. You know, you had to kind of like, you know, listen to it, if you like, and just sort of like, you know, see what was going on. It wasn't a single malt. There was a lot more happening than if it was just purely just Caol, and like I said, it just had this lovely kind of modern and old-fashioned Caol kind of character happening at the same time. So that was really impressive. So yeah, a lovely whiskey to end on. So anyway, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. No idea what's going to be happening next week, but we'll see what happens anyway. All I have to say is good afternoon and good dramming.
So kiss my